And this is a great spot for us to introduce our third tool to helping us understand these minor prophet books. And that is to think in oracles. When you read different types of literature in the Bible, they're put together in different ways. For example, if you take the gospel stories of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the building blocks of those books are the stories that they tell. They didn't just take random stories and put them in a random order. They were telling particular stories in a particular order to make their point, to tell us something very particular about Jesus and what he came to do. Or in Paul's letters in the New Testament, the building blocks of those are the paragraphs. To get an understanding of what Paul's argument is throughout the book, you take these little block paragraphs, understand what the point of each individual paragraph is, and see how it relates to the paragraphs around it. So to read the narrative books of the Bible, we need to think in stories. To read the letters of the New Testament, we think in paragraphs. And to read the prophetic works, we need to think in oracles. Now, when I say oracles, I want you to think of a speech that the prophet is giving, an individual speech that the prophet gives that describes a particular scene or addresses a particular topic or event. They're almost like the scenes of a movie, from one room to another, one location to another, telling different parts of the story. And each oracle that the prophet gives helps to build this message that they're giving to the people. It's not just random messages scattered around. They're trying to convey a particular message. But we don't always know from looking at the text of the Bible where one oracle ends and the next one begins. Next week in the book of Haggai, we'll see the oracles are marked very clearly. They're dated, so we know where they begin. But with Joel and most of the other prophets, we're not certain if these different oracles came all together in one day, or they were just different oracles that were spoken on different days that somebody compiled together later. Here in Joel chapter 3 that we're reading today, we have 3 different oracles, 3 different scenes that Joel is describing. He may have originally spoken these all at once as one long speech, or he may have given them at different times that were put together later. But here in verses 1 through 8, we have this courtroom scene where God is judging the nations. And this ends with a very definite phrase, the Lord has spoken. Then in verse 9, we change scene. We're no longer in a courtroom. We're on a battleground preparing for war. And then in verse 18, the scene changes again. We have a prosperous land with lots of abundance. And there are a few common types of oracle that you'll see throughout the prophetic literature in the Bible. There are several courtroom scenes, like here in Joel 3, that are often called lawsuit oracles. There are some short ones. There are some really long ones as well that go over numerous chapters, where God announces judgment on his enemies and sometimes judgment on his own people as well. There are funeral oracles or woe oracles. We saw one of these in Joel chapter 1, where the way that Joel wrote about the destruction of the land, it was like he was leading a funeral procession. But there are also positive oracles as well, like the promise oracle, which we're going to see at the end of chapter 3, where God promises to bless his people. And so, as you're reading one of these prophetic books in your chair time, I encourage you to go slowly, so that you can see when the language changes, when this scenery changes. You won't always be told, but I encourage you to look carefully at the imagery and the phrases that are used. And once you spot these different oracles, you can ask how that particular scene, how that particular setting helps you to understand the point that the prophet is trying to make.